Let's start. 241, Chapter 17 Number. Analysis. All carbohydrates are basically sugars. Complex carbohydrates are the good carbohydrates for your body. These complex sugar compounds are very difficult to break down and can trap other nutrients like vitamins and minerals in their chains. As they slowly break down, the other nutrients are also released into your body, and can provide you with fuel for a number of hours. Bad carbohydrates, on the other hand, are simple sugars. Because their structure is not complex, they are easy to break down and hold few nutrients for your body other than the sugars from which they are made. Your body breaks down these carbohydrates rather quickly, and what it cannot use is converted to fat and stored in the body. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 17 Number. 01. Boundaries between work and home are blurring as portable digital technology makes it increasingly possible to work anywhere, anytime. Individuals differ in how they like to manage their time to meet work and outside responsibilities. Some people prefer to separate or segment roles so that boundary crossings are minimized. For example, these people might keep separate email accounts for work and family and try to conduct work at the workplace and take care of family matters only during breaks and non-work time. We've even noticed more of these segmenters carrying two phones, one for work and one for personal use. Flexible schedules work well for these individuals because they enable greater distinction between time at work and time in other roles. Other individuals prefer integrating work and family roles all day long. This might entail constantly trading text messages with children from the office, or monitoring emails at home and on vacation, rather than returning to work to find hundreds of messages in their inbox. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 17 Number. 02. Sometimes the pace of change is far slower. The face you saw reflected in your mirror this morning probably appeared no different from the face you saw the day before or a week or a month ago. Yet we know that the face that stares back at us from the glass is not the same, cannot be the same, as it was 10 minutes ago. 10. The proof is in your photo album. Look at a photograph taken of yourself 5 or 10 years ago and you see clear differences between the face in the snapshot and the face in your mirror. 510. If you lived in a world without mirrors for a year and then saw your reflection, you might be surprised by the change. After an interval of 10 years without seeing yourself, you might not at first recognize the person peering from the mirror. 10. Even something as basic as our own face changes from moment to moment. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 17 Number. 03. According to educational psychologist Susan Engel, curiosity begins to decrease as young as 4 years old. Susan Engel. By the time we are adults, we have fewer questions and more default settings. As Henry James put it, disinterested curiosity is past, the mental grooves and channels set. Henry James. The decline in curiosity can be traced in the development of the brain through childhood. Though smaller than the adult brain, the infant brain contains millions more neural connections. The wiring, however, is a mess. The lines of communication between infant neurons are far less efficient than between those in the adult brain. The baby's perception of the world is consequently both intensely rich and wildly disordered. As children absorb more evidence from the world around them, certain possibilities become much more likely and more useful and harden into knowledge or beliefs. The neural pathways that enable those beliefs become faster and more automatic, while the ones that the child doesn't use regularly are pruned away. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 17 Number. 04. Should we use language to understand mind or mind to understand language? Analytic philosophy historically assumes that language is basic and that mind would make sense if proper use of language was appreciated. Modern cognitive science, however, rightly judges that language is just one aspect of mind of great importance in human beings but not fundamental to all kinds of thinking. Countless species of animals manage to navigate the world, solve problems, and learn without using language, through brain mechanisms that are largely preserved in the minds of humans. There is no reason to assume that language is fundamental to mental operations. Nevertheless, language is enormously important in human life and contributes largely to our ability to cooperate with each other in dealing with the world. Our species Homo sapiens has been astonishingly successful, which depended in part on language, first as an effective contributor to collaborative problem solving and much later, as collective memory through written records. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 17 Number 05. Television is the number one leisure activity in the United States and Europe, consuming more than half of our free time. 1. We generally think of television as a way to relax, tune out, and escape from our troubles for a bit each day. While this is true, there is increasing evidence that we are more motivated to tune into our favorite shows and characters when we are feeling lonely or have a greater need for social connection. Television watching does satisfy these social needs to some extent, at least in the short run. Unfortunately, it is also likely to crowd out other activities that produce more sustainable social contributions to our social well-being. The more television we watch, the less likely we are to volunteer our time or to spend time with people in our social networks. In other words, the more time we make for friends, the less time we have for friends in real life. Friends. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 17 Number 06. We often associate the concept of temperature with how hot or cold an object feels when we touch it. In this way, our senses provide us with a qualitative indication of temperature. Our senses, however, are unreliable and often mislead us. For example, if you stand in bare feet with one foot on carpet and the other on a tile floor, the tile feels colder than the carpet even though both are at the same temperature. The two objects feel different because tile transfers energy by heat at a higher rate than carpet does. Your skin measures the rate of energy transfer by heat rather than the actual temperature. What we need is a reliable and reproducible method for measuring the relative hotness or coldness of objects rather than the rate of energy transfer. Scientists have developed a variety of thermometers for making such quantitative measurements. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 17 Number 07. Friction is a force between two surfaces that are sliding, or trying to slide, across each other. For example, when you try to push a book along the floor, friction makes this difficult. Friction always works in the direction opposite to the direction in which the object is moving, or trying to move. So, friction always slows a moving object down. The amount of friction depends on the surface materials. The rougher the surface is, the more friction is produced. Friction also produces heat. For example, if you rub your hands together quickly, they will get warmer. Friction can be a useful force because it prevents our shoes slipping on the floor when we walk and stops car tires skidding on the road. When you walk, friction is caused between the tread on your shoes and the ground, acting to grip the ground and prevent sliding. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 17 Number 08. When an ecosystem is biodiverse, wildlife have more opportunities to obtain food and shelter. Different species react and respond to changes in their environment differently. For example, imagine a forest with only one type of plant in it, which is the only source of food and habitat for the entire forest food web. Now, there is a sudden dry season and this plant dies. Plant-eating animals completely lose their food source and die out, and so do the animals that prey upon them. But, when there is biodiversity, the effects of a sudden change are not so dramatic. Different species of plants respond to the drought differently, and many can survive a dry season. Many animals have a variety of food sources and don't just rely on one plant. Now our forest ecosystem is no longer at the death. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 17 Number 09. According to top nutrition experts, most nutrients are better absorbed and used by the body when consumed from a whole food instead of a supplement. However, many people feel the need to take pills, powders, and supplements in an attempt to obtain nutrients and fill the gaps in their diets. We hope these will give us more energy, prevent us from catching a cold in the winter, or improve our skin and hair. But in reality, the large majority of supplements are artificial and may not even be completely absorbed by your body. Worse, some are contaminated with other substances and contain ingredients not listed on the label. For example, a recent investigative report found heavy metals in 40% of 134 brands of protein powders on the market. 13440. With little control and regulation, taking supplements is a gamble and often costly. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 17 Number 10. Studies have consistently shown caffeine to be effective when used together with a pain reliever to treat headaches. The positive correlation between caffeine intake and staying alert throughout the day has also been well established. As little as 60 milligrams, the amount typically in 1 cup of tea, can lead to a faster reaction time. 60 milligrams. However, using caffeine to improve alertness and mental performance doesn't replace getting a good night's sleep. One study from 2018 showed that coffee improved reaction times in those with or without poor sleep, but caffeine seemed to increase errors in the group with little sleep. 2018. Additionally, this study showed that even with caffeine, the group with little sleep did not score as well as those with adequate sleep. It suggests that caffeine does not fully make up for inadequate sleep. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 17 Number 11. Rewarding business success doesn't always have to be done in a material way. A software company I once worked for had a great way of recognizing sales success. The sales director kept an air horn outside his office and would come out and blow the horn every time a salesperson settled a deal. The noise, of course, interrupted anything and everything happening in the office because it was unbelievably loud. However, it had an amazingly positive impact on everyone. Sometimes rewarding success can be as easy as that, especially when peer recognition is important. You should have seen the way the rest of the sales team wanted the air horn blown for them. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 17 Number 12. Food chain means the transfer of food energy from the source in plants through a series of organisms with the repeated process of eating and being eaten. In a grassland, grass is eaten by rabbits while rabbits in turn are eaten by foxes. This is an example of a simple food chain. This food chain implies the sequence in which food energy is transferred from producer to consumer or higher trophic level. It has been observed that at each level of transfer, a large proportion, 80 to 90%, of the potential energy is lost as heat. 80–90%. Hence the number of steps or links in a sequence is restricted, usually to 4 or 5. 4–5. The shorter the food chain or the nearer the organism is to the beginning of the chain, the greater the available energy intake is. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 17 Number 13. It is so easy to overestimate the importance of one defining moment and underestimate the value of making small improvements on a daily basis. Too often, we convince ourselves that massive success requires massive action. Whether it is losing weight, winning a championship, or achieving any other goal, we put pressure on ourselves to make some earth-shaking improvement that everyone will talk about. Meanwhile, improving by 1% isn't particularly notable, but it can be far more meaningful in the long run. 1. The difference this tiny improvement can make over time is surprising. Here's how the math works out: if you can get 1% better each day for 1 year, you'll end up 37 times better by the time you're done. 1137. Conversely, if you get 1% worse each day for 1 year, you'll decline nearly down to 0. 110. What starts as a small win or a minor failure adds up to something much more. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 17, Number 14. The continued survival of the human race can be explained by our ability to adapt to our environment. While we may have lost some of our ancient ancestors' survival skills, we have learned new skills as they have become necessary. Today, the gap between the skills we once had and the skills we now have grows ever wider as we rely more heavily on modern technology. Therefore, when you head off into the wilderness, it is important to fully prepare for the environment. Before a trip, research how the native inhabitants dress, work, and eat. How they have adapted to their way of life will help you to understand the environment and allow you to select the best gear and learn the correct skills. This is crucial because most survival situations arise as a result of a series of events that could have been avoided. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 17, Number 15. Gender research shows a complex relationship between gender and conflict styles. Some research suggests that women from Western cultures tend to be more caring than men. This tendency may result from socialization processes in which women are encouraged to care for their families and men are encouraged to be successful in competitive work environments. However, we live in a society where gender roles and boundaries are not as strict as in prior generations. There is significant variability in assertiveness and cooperation among women, as well as among men. Although conflict resolution experts should be able to recognize cultural and gender differences, they should also be aware of within-group variations and the risks of stereotyping. Culture and gender may affect the way people perceive, interpret, and respond to conflict. However, we must be careful to avoid overgeneralizations and to consider individual differences. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 17, Number 16. Currently, we cannot send humans to other planets. One obstacle is that such a trip would take years. A spacecraft would need to carry enough air, water, and other supplies needed for survival on the long journey. Another obstacle is the harsh conditions on other planets, such as extreme heat and cold. Some planets do not even have surfaces to land on. Because of these obstacles, most research missions in space are accomplished through the use of spacecraft without crews aboard. These explorations pose no risk to human life and are less expensive than ones involving astronauts. The spacecraft carry instruments that test the compositions and characteristics of planets. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 17, Number 17. Our brains are constantly solving problems. Every time we learn, or remember, or make sense of something, we solve a problem. Some psychologists have characterized all infant language learning as problem solving, extending to children such scientific procedures as learning by experiment, or hypothesis testing. Grown-ups rarely explain the meaning of new words to children, let alone how grammatical rules work. Instead, they use the words or the rules in conversation and leave it to children to figure out what is going on. In order to learn language, an infant must make sense of the contexts in which language occurs. Problems must be solved. We have all been solving problems of this kind since childhood, usually without awareness of what we are doing. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 17 Number 18. There are some cultures that can be referred to as people who live outside of time. The Amandawa tribe, living in Brazil, does not have a concept of time that can be measured or counted. Amandawa. Rather, they live in a world of serial events, rather than seeing events as being rooted in time. Researchers also found that no one had an age. Instead, they change their names to reflect their stage of life and position within their society, so a little child will give up their name to a newborn sibling and take on a new one. In the US we have so many metaphors for time and its passing that we think of time as a thing, that is, the weekend is almost gone, or I haven't got the time. We think such statements are objective, but they aren't. We create these metaphors, but the Amandawa don't talk or think in metaphors for time. Amandawa. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 17 Number 19. The natural world provides a rich source of symbols used in art and literature. Plants and animals are central to mythology, dance, song, poetry, rituals, festivals, and holidays around the world. Different cultures can exhibit opposite attitudes toward a given species. Snakes, for example, are honored by some cultures and hated by others. Rats are considered pests in much of Europe and North America and greatly respected in some parts of India. Of course, within cultures individual attitudes can vary dramatically. For instance, in Britain many people dislike rodents, and yet there are several associations devoted to breeding them, including the National Mouse Club and the National Fancy Rat Club. National Mouse Club, National Fancy Rat Club. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 17 Number 20. Achieving focus in a movie is easy. Directors can simply point the camera at whatever they want the audience to look at. Close UPS and slow camera shots can emphasize a killer's hand or a character's brief glance of guilt. On stage, focus is much more difficult because the audience is free to look wherever they like. The stage director must gain the audience's attention and direct their eyes to a particular spot or actor. This can be done through lighting, costumes, scenery, voice, and movements. Focus can be gained by simply putting a spotlight on one actor, by having one actor in red and everyone else in gray, or by having one actor move while the others remain still. All these techniques will quickly draw the audience's attention to the actor whom the director wants to be in focus. MTC. Good job.